Hello, my name is Trisha Pritikin, and I'm the author of the multi-award-winning book, The Hanford Plaintiffs: Voices from the Fight for Atomic Justice, that was published in March 2020 by University Press of Kansas. I mention the multiple awards because this book has received a great deal of attention in the United States for its ability to educate the public on the health effects of low-dose radiation exposure. I apologize ahead of time for looking at my notes here, but I carefully prepared for this book launch, and I want to make sure I don't leave anything out of what I want to say. So I'll be looking at my notes from time to time. Hanford is a nuclear weapons production site in eastern Washington state, which no longer produces plutonium, but produced plutonium for the bomb called Fat Man that decimated Nagasaki on August 9, 1945, and the facility continued to produce plutonium for the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile throughout the Cold War decades that followed. I'm most grateful to Nagao-san of明石Shoten Publishing House in Tokyo for recognizing the importance of making this work accessible to Japanese readers. I'm indebted to Professor Yuki Miyamoto of DePaul University in Chicago, the able translator for the manuscript. There are striking parallels in the accounts of health damage and exposure-related loss in civilians downwind of Hanford and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor meltdown. Although the source of radioactive fallout differed, because Hanford's fallout resulted from the manufacture of plutonium, while fallout from Fukushima Daiichi resulted from the catastrophic meltdown of power production reactors, many of the same highly dangerous radioactive substances were present in the fallout. Radiogenic cancers, other illnesses, and related losses in the two downwind populations are highly similar and often identical. For this reason, the stories of the Hanford plaintiffs are highly informative to better understanding the full scope of potential current and future damages to the young people who filed personal injury claims against Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings, Inc. in Tokyo District Court. That litigation is also referred to as the 311 Children's Thyroid Cancer Trial. The Hanford plaintiffs introduces the stories of 24 civilians exposed as infants, children, or young adults to covert releases of radioactive fallout from the Hanford site, beginning in late 1944. These individuals were plaintiffs in mass toxic tort personal injury litigation, otherwise known as In re Hanford Nuclear Reservation litigation, that was filed against Hanford contractors in approximately 1991. The cases were settled in 2015, with 2 bellwether jury verdicts which occurred in 2005. I'd like to discuss the many parallels between the experience of civilians exposed downwind of Hanford and Fukushima Daiichi, and the injustices and challenges we face. Firstly, we were all exposed to radioactive iodine in the form I-131. While the range of airborne radionuclides and fallout from Hanford and from Fukushima Daiichi differ to some extent, significant levels of radioactive iodine were released in both instances. Radioactive iodine is absorbed through inhalation, through the milk pathway, and from other food and drink. Radioactive iodine taken into the body through respiration or food and drink accumulates in the thyroid and can cause cancer there. The two groups faced the same injustices. Firstly, neither group of civilians were informed of the danger. At Fukushima Daiichi, when the 3 reactors melted down, releasing massive amounts of airborne radioactive fallout, following the major earthquake and resulting tsunami on 3/11/11, Downwind civilians did not learn of their ongoing exposures until weeks later. Some people evacuated into the path of the fallout rather than to safety, not knowing where the fallout was spreading. Because people were not informed, they were not able to protect themselves or their children by immediately evacuating to areas outside the fallout zone. Individual radiation exposures were not measured, and no information was made available on the specific radionuclides to which people were exposed. At Hanford, over the facility's 40-plus years of operation, the public was never told that the facility was chronically releasing fallout across a mass, multi-state area of the U.S. Pacific Northwest. Hanford downwinders, like myself, did not learn of their exposures until 1986, 44 years after Hanford's off-site emissions began. The only reason we learned of our exposures was that public pressure had grown and grown until the Department of Energy was forced to reveal and declassify thousands of early Hanford operating records. Had people been told they could have been evacuated or at a minimum taken simple precautions, including a daily non-radioactive iodine tablet or used iodized table salt to block I-131 absorption by the thyroid. We also would have greatly benefited from knowing what was wrong with us years earlier, because many of us began to get sick way before 1986 with the earliest symptoms of Hashimoto's and autoimmune thyroiditis and other cancers. To have known earlier would have helped with diagnosis and treatment. Individual radiation exposures were not measured, and no information was made available on the specific radionuclides to which we were exposed. For both Fukushima Daiichi exposed downwinders and Hanford downwinders, the government and nuclear industry deny any causal link. The government representatives of the nuclear industry and other nuclear energy supporters in both Japan and the United States deny any causal link between exposure to fallout and the large numbers of people in both downwind populations now now suffering from thyroid and other cancers and other radiogenic diseases. In both countries, screening effect and overdiagnosis are cited as the reason for high numbers of people found with these diseases. We both have the same cancers and other radiogenic diseases. That includes thyroid disease, because radioactive iodine is absorbed by the thyroid, which results frequently in hypothyroidism. Many Hanford downwinders developed a form of thyroid disease called autoimmune thyroiditis, which is often Hashimoto's disease, not always. Autoimmune thyroiditis produces uncomfortable symptoms of alienating hyperthyroidism, that's too much thyroid hormone in the blood, and hypothyroidism, too little thyroid hormone in the blood. Sorry for my breathing problems. This is just one of the health issues I have to deal with that relate to my throat and hypothyroidism. Symptoms of hypothyroidism include chronic fatigue, which I have, weight gain, cold and heat intolerance, hair loss, dry skin, constipation, depression, muscle aches and weakness, muscle cramps, and mental fog. Symptoms of hyperthyroidism, that's too much thyroid hormone, include tachycardia, that's a fast heart rate, panic attacks, pressure, and a feeling of graininess in the head, vertigo, which is dizziness, intense fatigue, mood swings, insomnia, muscle weakness, heat sensitivity, diarrhea, tremor, palpitations, and shortness of breath. Hypoparathyroidism is also a disease that many of us will have following thyroidectomies. That's what happened to me when I lost my parathyroid glands during my thyroidectomy. Treatment for thyroid cancer usually involves partial or full thyroidectomy. During the surgery, the parathyroid glands may be accidentally removed as they're very small, often buried within the inflamed thyroid gland, and they're very hard to differentiate from thyroid tissue, especially in cases of autoimmune thyroiditis where there's a lot of inflammation. If the parathyroids are lost, the result is hypoparathyroidism. The parathyroid glands regulate serum calcium levels, so a person like me with hypoparathyroidism will have great difficulty maintaining adequate serum, that's blood, calcium levels. As blood calcium levels plunge, painful tetany, which is a severe muscle cramping, can result. People with this disease are at risk for kidney calcification and kidney failure, and we must be monitored carefully for the rest of our lives. The next common serious disease between Hanford downwinders and Fukushima Daiichi downwinders is thyroid cancer. Children are particularly susceptible to the effects of radiation. Many of us exposed in infancy, childhood, and as young adults to Hanford's radioactive fallout have gone on to develop thyroid cancer. Thyroid cancer is normally rare in children, with only 1 or 2 cases found per million in a year. Following the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, 293 cases have been confirmed. After the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, several thousand cases of pediatric thyroid cancer occurred in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. I wanted to mention now that we made great use during the Hanford Downwinder litigation of epidemiologic studies of those populations that I just mentioned, because any population exposed to a great deal of I-131 will eventually reveal significant levels of thyroid disease and thyroid cancer. Even if a definitive causal link cannot be proven, if you have enough evidence of thyroid cancer and thyroid disease following I-131 exposure, it certainly helps to accumulate convincing evidence that will hopefully help at least suggest the causal link between the exposures and the disease. Thyroidectomies can produce a significant scar across the neck, which can be stigmatizing, especially to younger people. If the thyroid cancer has metastasized, that means spread beyond the thyroid gland. Even total removal of the thyroid can leave cancer behind in other parts of the body. And this results in the need for lifetime monitoring for further metastasis, and in chemotherapy and radiation to defeat any cancer recurrences. It also results in a lifetime of worry for the person who has this problem. If the cancer is particularly aggressive, as was the case for my father who had thyroid cancer and died from it, the metastases can block the esophagus and the windpipe, necessitating a tracheotomy and a feeding tube. Tracheotomy is a hole in the throat for breathing, and the feeding tube had to be put in because his esophagus was blocked. We also have many other cancers in common. Many people exposed to Hanford's radioactive fallout as children have gone on to develop other cancers which have been recognized by federal law in the U.S. as radiation caused under nuclear worker compensation law. Also, autoimmune disease. Many Hanford downwinders, including myself, have autoimmune thyroiditis. Because we have an autoimmune disease, we are at increased risk for further autoimmune diseases. As can be seen in the stories in the Hanford plaintiffs, many of the plaintiffs have other autoimmune diseases secondary to autoimmune thyroiditis. These include rheumatoid arthritis, MS, and asthma. Another issue that's been very difficult for women downwind of Hanford is the occurrence of reproductive disorders. Hypothyroidism can result in difficulty or inability to become pregnant or to carry a baby to term. Many women exposed during childhood to Hanford's fallout later experienced miscarriages, stillborn births, or neonatal deaths. There was, in fact, a spike of neonatal deaths in the Hanford downwind area during the late 1940s and 1950s, which were years of significant fallout release from the Hanford site. And I just wanted to touch quickly upon a couple other areas of damages which are common between the two populations. Firstly, symptoms and suffering from radiogenic cancer and other disease can interfere with academic goals. Repeated treatments and ongoing debilitating symptoms can lead to reduction of work hours or job loss, which in turn result frequently in a lifetime of poverty or dependence on government assistance. Mounting medical expenses not covered by insurance are a lifelong burden. And finally, stigma. The extent of stigma experienced by a radiation-exposed person varies between cultures, but it's very real. Thank you for your time, and again, I am thrilled and thankful and grateful that the Hanford Plaintiffs has been translated for the Japanese audience, and I hope it is of some assistance and comfort to the plaintiffs in the litigation and to others who haven't filed suit but who are suffering from the health effects from fallout from Fukushima Daiichi. Thank you for your time.